Howdy all, and welcome back to another episode of the Sanctified Podcast, the show where we explore the lives of various saints throughout history and learn about what they did and how we came to recognize them as saints today. Today, we're going to explore the life of Saint Jacques Berthieu, a very, very dedicated missionary. Jacques was born on November 27th in 1838, and his parents were just humble farmers. They couldn't really afford the luxuries of life, but they made up for that with their devotion to their faith. Jacques had 6 siblings, and they made the most of what they could do in their little town in Montargis in Polignac, France. But when he was just a kid, his oldest sister died, and then he was the oldest of all of his siblings, and he had a lot of responsibility. They looked up to him, and they needed his guidance. Eventually, though, he joined a seminary to become a priest. He'd guided his siblings for so long, he wanted to help guide others now. And he was ordained as a priest on May 21st, 1864, after completing his schooling at the seminary of St. Flour. Right away, Jacques' bishop, Pompignac, appointed him as vicar in Rome St. Mary to replace an old and ailing priest there. In this position, Jacques worked devotedly for 9 years, helping the parishioners of his community. But Jacques felt that he was called to do more. He wanted to go on missions and share his faith with distant lands that may have never even heard of the Lord. He joined the Society of Jesus and became a Jesuit. He was part of the novitiate in Pau Pyrenees Atlantique, and he started on October 31st, 1873, when he was just 35 years old. And he felt like his life was just getting started. He was about to set out on all sorts of new adventures, and these adventures would allow him to share his joy and his faith with the world. Jacques was assigned his first mission, and he sailed from the port of Marseille in 1875 to a couple of islands near present-day Madagascar. These islands were under French jurisdiction, so there shouldn't have been too much of a language barrier for him. The islands were Réunion and Sainte Marie, and just so he would be on the safe side, he did study Malagasy to be better prepared, and Malagasy or Malagasy is basically the native culture, the native languages, so he just wanted to be as prepared as he could for what he was about to embark on. But then, in 1881, French legislation closed the territories to Jesuits, and so Jacques had to relocate to Madagascar proper. At this time, Madagascar had no connection to France or the islands that Jacques had been on, so it was a pretty big shift for him. But Jacques and the other missionaries were still going to carry out their mission on this new island on Madagascar. After all, it shouldn't be that much different since they were basically right next to each other, right? But Jacques felt that he hadn't made much of a difference yet, and he wrote a letter saying as much. He wrote, "My uselessness and my spiritual misery serve to humiliate me, but they do not discourage me. I await the hour when I can do something with the grace of God." And his opportunity would come, though it took a few years, and it was far more terrible than anyone could have ever expected. Jacques first went to Toamasina, and then he went to Antananarivo. But his superiors moved him one more time, just to complete a distant mission in Ambohimandroso. Jacques couldn't stay for too long, though, because the French-Malagasy War broke out in 1883, and he again had to move. He oversaw a mission in Ambositra for 5 years, after which he went to Antananarivo in 1891. This new post really didn't seem all that bad. It was just northeast of the nation's capital, and there were 18 other mission stations for Jacques to oversee, though these other mission stations were in some pretty remote and fairly unfriendly places. Unluckily for Jacques, France decided that they wanted Madagascar to be their territory, and so they captured the royal palaces in September of 1894, because they wanted the nation for themselves. They wanted its resources. And as a result, the missionaries were targeted by the locals and the military of Madagascar. Jacques tried to get the Christian missionaries protection under the French troops, and his efforts did work for a little while, but then a French colonel denied protection to the missionaries after Jacques criticized the colonel on how he was treating the native women of the nation. So Jacques had to try to find safety elsewhere. He traveled to Antananarivo with his group of Christians, and he tried to find safety there. While on this journey, Jacques noticed one of the young men had an injured foot. He was having trouble keeping up with the rest of the group. Since Jacques was one of the higher-ups of the group, if you will, he had a horse to ride on. But he very quickly dismounted after he noticed this young man, and he gave it to him to help on his journey. Though he was also weak from the journeys and the lack of resources, he led the horse and the man on the horse to safety. And there are many other accounts of people who saw him or worked with him that talk about how kind, generous, and devoted Jacques was. He was always helping others in any way he could. When people would search for him for help, he was always found on his knees in prayer. He truly believed in his faith, and he believed that he was able to help anyone and everyone. So he never gave up hope. Then, On June 8th, 1896, Metalamba fighters came to the village and they found Jacques. They took him and stripped him of his cassock, or a priest's robes, and they stole his crucifix. One of the soldiers said to him, "Is this your amulet? Is it thus that you mislead the people? Will you continue to pray for a long time?" And Jacques responded with, "I have to pray until I die," which is not what the soldier wanted to hear. The soldier hit Jacques in the head with a machete, and Jacques fell to the ground. Though Jacques was bleeding terribly and very badly injured, he wasn't dead. The Metalamba soldiers took him with them. After a 10-kilometer march, they arrived in Ambohitra, and here there was a church that Jacques had helped build for his mission. The soldiers thought about bringing him to their base of operations, but they said that he would desecrate the Sampi, the idols that were believed to be sacred by the natives. So, instead, they threw stones at Jacques until he fell. Then one of the soldiers took Jacques' handkerchief and soaked it in water before covering it in dirt, and so it was just a muddy mess. Then they tied it around Jacques' head to make his injury even worse. Some of the soldiers started shouting, "Behold, the king of the Europeans." Well, obviously it was in their own language, but that's what it translates to. Jacques had been through so much in such a short time. He was utterly exhausted, and it took everything in him just to keep praying. Later that night, a village chieftain decided that Jacques must die. He gathered a small group of 6 men, armed with guns, and they marched to Jacques. When they arrived, Jacques was on his knees. 2 of the men fired at him, but both of them missed. Jacques made the sign of the cross and bowed. The village chieftain was angered by this because he just wanted Jacques dead, and he saw both of his men miss fairly easy shots. He said, "Give up your hateful religion. Do not mislead the people anymore, and we will make you our counselor and our chief, and we will spare you." But Jacques just replied with, "I cannot consent to this. I prefer to die." And Jacques bowed his head in prayer once again. 2 more men fired, and both missed again. Then another fired a shot, and he hit Jacques, but it wasn't a fatal shot. Finally, one of the 6 went up very close to Jacques to get into a position where he would not be able to miss. And he shot Jacques. Jacques died that very night. They dumped his body in the Mananara River, and he was never seen again. However, many of the locals reported miraculous healings whenever they would drink water from the river where his body was dumped. Maybe he was still watching over them from above. Poor Jacques Berthieu. He just wanted to help, and he ended up in the wrong place at the wrong time. He had no control over France attacking Madagascar, but people wanted someone to take their anger out on, and he was just unfortunately the target. Though I imagine that he would consider his sacrifice worth it because of the difference that he made leading up to that point and the lives that he saved after the invasion. In 1940, on June 26th, the cause for Jacques' beatification was begun, and he was declared venerable in 1964. He was officially beatified by Pope Paul VI on October 17th, 1965. And finally, he was canonized on October 12th, 2012, on Mission Sunday by Pope Benedict XVI. The French Province Society of Jesus celebrates Jacques' canonization on June 8th, but the rest of the world celebrates his feast day on February 4th. Because of everything he did and his sacrifice, Jacques is considered patron saint of Madagascar. So what are your thoughts on Saint Jacques Berthieu? He was just in the wrong place at the wrong time and held a position that attracted a little too much of the wrong attention, really. He didn't deserve what happened to him. I look forward to hearing your thoughts about Saint Jacques, and thank you for listening. If you'd like to support the channel, you can subscribe, download the episode, like, comment, share it with a friend, or send me a suggestion on a saint that I can check out by emailing me at sanctifiedpodcast@proton.me. You can find the show on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, Podbean, and more. Just search for the Sanctified Podcast, and I should have a few episodes there. If I don't, let me know, and we'll get right on it. Take care, and have a wonderful day.